Hello everyone, welcome to today's training session for the SAF-HOLLAND FW35TT terminal tractor fifth wheel. Quick introduction, my name is Tony Ryan. I'm the Technical Services Manager, which means I look after the field service group. To my right, your left, is Dan Cohn. He's National Accounts Manager. We're both going to chop and change through this presentation today. So Dan's going to go first and I'll let him take over.
Great. Thanks, Tony. So the agenda we have today that we're going to be running through is FW35TT fifth wheel identification, inspection. We'll do a quick overview of features and benefits, some of the design changes we made from the previous model, some important things to know about aftermarket fit up, the owner's manual, again, inspection, lubrication, adjustment, rebuild procedures. We're going to leave to a video, but the meat of the program is going to be a hands-on demonstration that Tony and I will do here at the end to show you how to inspect the wheel and things to look for. We've got a few updates that we have made to the wheel. We'll talk about those. And then lastly, the available resources that you have for disposal in addition to this video. So to start with, fifth wheel identification for all Holland fifth wheels, it is on the driver's side on the ramp. There is a sticker there, which we're pointing out here, and it has a QR code attached to it. So that QR code will take you to a site called Parts on Demand, POD, and in there you will have all the manuals that are pertinent to that particular model of fifth wheel. We're showing two here because the top one is an OEM variation, starts with an FW35. If you order that, you are going to be getting the top plate along with the feet, the brackets, and any slide or mounting base. So if you're just looking to replace a top plate, the correct part number that you're going to order is the XA-351, which is the second sticker there. Just a note there so that you don't end up ordering a top level part number when you only need the top plate itself. So inspection and adjustment, we only recommend TLN 5001. It's the adjustment tool there on the left, and it is good for any fifth wheel that accepts a 2-inch kingpin. And it is necessary, very necessary with the FW35TT. That flat plate will allow us to get an accurate measurement on the wheel. If you have anything that looks like the tool on the right, please throw it away and order a TLN 5001 from your local SAF-HOLLAND distributor. Okay, FW35TT, it replaces the old 351-03505 top plate. When we did that, we were able to bump up the capacity to 80,000 vertical load rating, reduce the rebuild time by 60%, and we'll talk about some of those things that we've changed to allow for that. Increase the lock security with less driver inputs. So we do have an air over mechanical lockdown feature, and we improve the mechanism performance for increased life. And we'll show you a few of those things that we've done. There is a promotional video on 35TT that is on our microsite, and we'll give you that address later on in the presentation. But just to talk about some of the features we have on the FW35TT, we're going to start out at the top and work our way down the fifth wheel. So at the top, lockdown mode. It's just added security. We got a dual acting cylinder now versus a single acting cylinder. So when the fifth wheel is locked, air actually holds the fifth wheel, the jaws closed, in addition to the mechanical locks that we have. Optimized cam plate, the crescent cam. We've got removable spring retainers out on the front. So that allows you to change that front retaining spring without getting hit in the face with it. The integrated automatic secondary. This is another big one. We've taken the over-the-road design for the automatic secondary, incorporated into the 35TT, and we'll show you that. And again, the 80,000 pound vertical load rating. So increased material in the bridge in key areas to get us that 80,000 pounds. Moving down that strategic rib structure, again, adding to that to get up to the 80,000 pounds. Easy lock replacements. That's one of the big things you'll notice with this wheel. You don't have to press out the locks. They are slip fit pins now and can easily be replaced in 15 minutes. We can do a lock change. It does incorporate the proven Holland twin lock design, the best lock design out there. And we've got no lube pocket insert liners, and we'll show you those as well. So just to get a little more in depth, for those of you that are familiar with the 03505, these are the things that we have changed when we went to the 35TT. Starting with the pins, we have slip fit pins now. Again, I mentioned you do not have to press these out. There are no clips on them. It's a nut and bolt design, basically. Take the nuts off, push the pins out. You can pull the jaws out, replace that jaw in a matter of 15 minutes. Cam plate design, you can see on the 03505, it was a very big following pattern that the cam bolt had to go through. Now we've gone to the crescent cam, and it is a very smooth operating cam plate. Pocket liners, the 03505, you had to weld those in, and when it was time to replace them, you had to grind out the bars to remove the pocket inserts. We have gone to Ostemper ductile iron pocket inserts. They require no lube, so there are no grease fittings, grease certs to lube the pocket liners. They are lube free with that Ostemper ductile iron, and we've also gone to a clinch pin design versus the old roll pin, which was very difficult to get out. So improving it from a maintenance standpoint. Out the front, these two bolts, remove the two bolts, and it will allow you to replace a spring if that happens to break. Word of advice on those bolts, and we'll talk about them in depth when we get into the live demonstration and we talk about the updates. Those bolts need to stay tight. That area gets hit repeatedly during coupling, and those bolts need to stay tight, Loctite them. If you do happen to remove them, work them side to side. Do not try taking one bolt out and then the second bolt, because you will probably snap it off. So when you work them side to side, a little bit on each side, gradually take them out, likewise going in side to side so you don't snap those things off. Automatic secondary lock. 03505 had a manual that would have to be pinned. If you go out on a DOT highway, you remove the pin, allows that secondary lock to come behind the yoke. With the new design, we have gone to the over-the-road version, which is an automatic secondary. So the cam actually moves the automatic secondary out of the way. We'll show you that when we get on the wheel and what to look for there. Dual acting cylinder. Previous design, you hit the palm valve, it opened up the locks. With this one, once the locks are closed, you release the trailer brakes. This energizes the other side of the cylinder. So it's an air over mechanical, keeping those locks closed while the vehicle is in motion. We do have some maintenance that is required, whether it's a dual acting or single acting, and we'll get into that with the maintenance procedures. The fit up, if you go to install an FW35TT and you're replacing an 03505, you only have one airline, and it's coming from the fifth wheel lock release, the palm valve. That will stay constant. If you want to incorporate the lockdown feature in an older vehicle, very easy to do. You just plumb in a T fitting and hook that to the other end of the cylinder. You just need to make sure that it is past the tractor protection valve so that you cannot open the locks when it's going down, when it's in motion. But very easy to do. Just tee it in. If you don't want to tee it in, that's even easier. Just run a few feet of line to atmosphere. No need to hook it up. You will not have that lockdown feature, but the wheel will operate just fine without it. The reason for the extra line running to atmosphere is just so it's not pulling in dust and dirt contaminants from around the wheel. Owner's manual, readily available. There's the number for the manual, and we have this in the resources as well. We'll show you how to get to it through the microsite website. There's a variety of ways to get to the owner's manual, but readily available and on Parts on Demand, the POD site, when you pull up the QR code. Now I'm going to turn it back over to Tony for lubrication, inspection, and maintenance.
Thanks, Dan. All right, as listed here, there's a couple of different maintenance schedules to look for. So quickly, just make sure that the top plate is lubricated, make sure the operation is correct, locking mechanisms are working as it should. Monthly, we recommend that you thoroughly clean the fifth wheel top plate and lubricate the lock mechanism itself to make sure that's in good working order, and just inspect the fifth wheel for anything bent, worn, broken, any cracks or anything like that you have to do. Just make sure that everything's going to be okay to the next time you inspect it. We know that FW35TTs and any other terminal tractors, they give the fifth wheels a very hard time. So if you look after this, it will look after you as well. So lubrication points. You'll see a lot of letters pointing to various points of the fifth wheel. Here we'll make this really easy. Almost all of them are a lithium-based water-resistant grease. We recommend that on just about every point here, except one, and it's item D, which is the pivot point for the cam plate. Just a light oil on that. Lubricate that with a light oil. The rest of them are, like I said, lithium-based, water-resistant grease on those points. The other lubrication point that we have here is the air cylinder. So the piston shaft here, just extend the shaft. You can either do that with air, or if it's disconnected, you can pull it out by hand. Wipe down the shaft. Make sure it's all clean. Please don't use any abrasives or anything that's going to attract dirt that will then retract into the cylinder and destroy the seal. Just make sure that it's cleaned with some penetrating oil, shop towel. That's all you need. Nothing fancy on there. As for the air cylinder, again, it's a simple case of some light oil goes into the air cylinder. So as Dan mentioned earlier, there's two fittings, one on either end. They're push to connect fittings. So just pop the airline off and a couple of drops of tool oil, 2 to 4 drops of tool oil accordingly through that. Feel free to cycle it if you feel that way inclined, and then put it back together. The oil will work its way through into the system anyway, and that will make sure that the seal is all lubricated, doesn't get dry and crack or anything like that, and that cylinder will continue to last. Like I said, we've had a couple of people in the past that had air cylinders come back. We just dropped some tool oil in them and they work like brand new again. So that couple of drops of tool oil, get that into your PM routine, that will solve you a lot of problems down the track. Damaged components. In this case, it's a yoke that is bent here. Well, it should look like a straight U shape. The left-hand side of that yoke here, and if I get my mouse to come along, here we go. So this side is essentially okay. You'll see here, this side is bent up a little bit here, and then well and truly bent on the right-hand side here. That's what you're looking for as far as a bent yoke would go. Chances are this has been a high hook, and drivers tried to hit the end of the yoke shaft, and that was one of the first things that gave way. The yoke shaft itself is probably bent, but you can't see it underneath the spring here. Other things to look for on a fifth wheel, improper center loading of a fifth wheel. So the center section of the fifth wheel is actually recessed. So nothing should actually hit that at all. So if you see a wear mark like the picture on the right hand side there, obviously that's in the shape of a kingpin on the upper coupler. Something's not right. So first step there, you would put a straight edge across the fifth wheel and just check that the fifth wheel is straight. It hasn't been in a wreck, a rollover or something like that. If the fifth wheel is correct, then chances are it's going to be the upper coupler that is bent. So you're going to try and find if it's a matched unit, try and find the trailer that it pulled last or recently and see what happens. As far as other things to look for, make sure that the cam plate is well lubricated. As we mentioned in the lubrication points previously, you don't want them to be dry. You'd be surprised how many we go and look at and they're not black or lubricated. They're actually orange and rusty, and that slows the mechanism down and creates havoc with the lock mechanism. So just check that cam plate around that crescent section there. You can see the top two red arrows there. Make sure that's lubricated, and that will serve you well. Also check for any, while you're looking for anything that's bent or broken, also check for missing components. This is a photo I took a while back, and there's no washer on the cam bolt that goes into the yoke shaft. And it's a bit hard to see in there, but there's also no roller inside there as well. So obviously this fifth wheel was not operating correctly because someone had pulled bits of it off and tried to fix it, and they didn't do it correctly. So I mentioned earlier about high hooking of trailers. So what's high hooking, for those of you who don't know? It's when the kingpin goes over the top of the fifth wheel, and you'll see on the top right hand picture there, the kingpin has actually hit the yoke shaft, and it will bend the yoke shaft. Drivers should in theory notice if the trailer is suddenly a lot closer to the cabin, especially in a yard spotter application. They should definitely know that scenario, but that's not always the case. What happens when they do high hook? So obviously it bends the yoke shaft, and can cause damage to components under there, but there's also some visible guidelines that you'll see. So that top right picture there, you'll see a series of marks where the kingpin has hit the fifth wheel on some odd angles and taken the grease off, and it's been there long enough. It's actually got some orange light surface rust to it, but you can see the visible marks where the kingpin has hit. It didn't go in through the throat of the fifth wheel. It went over the top plate and would have gone right over the front skirt of the fifth wheel. The picture on the left-hand side is actually the same fifth wheel. It's not just another picture I've got. It's actually the same fifth wheel as the top right picture. And you will see on that particular one, on the left-hand side of the fifth wheel, you have a buildup of grease coming off the front skirt of the fifth wheel. And on the right-hand side, you'll see a wipe mark around here. There's an older wipe mark around here and a fresh one when we put the lock tester on. But you can see where the kingpin has gone over the top and actually wiped the shape of the kingpin into the grease on the front skirt. So there's some visible guidelines as far as, has it tried to drop a trailer? I know in yard spotter applications, sometimes the driver doesn't even say anything to management. He'll just literally go back, hook up again and take off. Doesn't say anything, but that doesn't mean that it hasn't done some damage to some components. And it's not worth checking your fleet just to make sure nothing has happened to the fifth wheel. So we do have available a FW35TT rebuild video. Should there be enough damage to a fifth wheel that you need to rebuild it. It's readily available in multiple places. We can send it to you, but it's available to the public on YouTube. It's on our website. It's on our microsites, which there's a resources page at the end, which will show you how to get there. So the updates, do you want me to cover this or you want to do it?
I'll do it.
Okay.
All right. So some updates that we've made to the 35TT since introducing it revolve around three key areas: the cam pivot bolt falling out of the assembly, the cam plate rotating over the secondary lock, and the spring block bolts loosening, which I mentioned earlier. And these are the three that we are addressing here in the near future. So the cam pivot bolt, the tolerance stack up was such that In some instances, we were not getting a good lock on the nut, the engagement in the locker on the nut, and allowed that nut to back off. So to remedy that, we are looking at increasing the length of that bolt from 40 millimeters to 55 millimeters, making sure there is full thread engagement and well into the locking feature of the nut. Cam plate rotating over the secondary lock. So along with keeping that nut and bolt connection tight, we are also increasing the length of the roll pin on the secondary lock, taking that from 3 inches to 3.5 inches. So that will ensure that even if the cam plate is sagging a little bit loose, that secondary lock will not rotate over it and fall into the hole in the cam plate. So a very easy fix there, just adding a 1/2 inch to that roll pin. And finally, the spring block bolts. As I said earlier, this area gets a lot of abuse. Every time it couples, it gets slammed very hard. Those bolts, if you do not keep them tight, they will break off. If you try running one down without taking the other side down relatively close, they will snap off. So to keep them tight, thread locker, of course, but we're also looking at introducing washers underneath the heads of the bolts to try to introduce some stretch into the fastener to keep it tight and keep those bolts where they're supposed to be and help to address them from coming loose. So those are the 3 areas that we're looking to improve here. Existing kits, once we've got some existing kits that will be updated with the washers, with the longer bolts, and with the longer roll pin. And we are introducing a new kit, RK351-TT-FS, as well. All right, back to you, Tony.
All right, so the lock tester, as we mentioned earlier, we recommend the use of the lock tester, which is HOLLAND 5001. That's the part number. That's the image you see in the graphic on the left-hand side. Again, if you see that one on the right-hand side, please throw it in the trash, get the correct one. The reason we recommend this one is it's just got 3 points of contact, makes sure that the kingpin is always squared to the 5th wheel itself. It works on any 5th wheel in our range. And that way, if you are using it on another 5th wheel for an over-the-road use, you can actually get a correct adjustment on it. Whereas that's one on the right-hand side, that kingpin is never going to be squared to the 5th wheel. You're going to get incorrect and weird adjustments to it, and it just runs the risk of having other problems. So we recommend that. When you're using this lock tester on the FW35TT, the yard spotter or terminal tractor version of the 5th wheel, there is no adjustment, unlike the standard FW35 5th wheel, which is the over-the-road version. This is the big brother to it, but the same basic mechanism. You can adjust the 35. You can't adjust this. The components are just built a little more heavy duty because it's a terminal tractor version. But what you can do is just to check that if the 5th wheel needs to be rebuilt. So you just put the lock tester into the 5th wheel and then just check if play exceeds 3/8 of an inch. So once you've got that in, just push the lock tester all the way back, or pull it all the way back, mark it with a scribe, push it all the way forward, mark it with another scribe, measure the distance, and if it exceeds 3/8 of an inch, it's time to rebuild the 5th wheel or replace the top plate altogether. Okay, give me a second and I will change screens here, and we're going to go and do some hands-on training. So are you going to do the camera?
Yes, I am.
All right, here we go. Okay, so as Dan mentioned before, a couple of the changes here before we flip this thing over. This is the spring retention block. The yoke shaft is sitting just in here right now, and these are the 2 bolts you need to be looking out for. Make sure that these are tight. That doesn't mean that if they're a little bit loose, go and retighten them, because all you'll do is break the Loctite loose. So make sure just check them and make sure that they are tight. The other thing, while we're looking at the front of the 5th wheel here, I mentioned this section here is actually recessed, so you should have no marks whatsoever, like that picture we saw before, showing that the kingpin is actually worn on the uppercut. Okay. This one is a not quite new 5th wheel. We always get people say, why are we using brand new fifth wheels when they don't look like that in the field? This one has been in the field briefly. So there's a little bit of grease, as you can see. Something else we will look at, Dan, if you want to come around here, just look at the serial tag down the bottom here. So this is what we were mentioning before about this is an aftermarket fifth wheel, an XA-35TT. So this was sold as an aftermarket fifth wheel. So there was no base plate or anything that you would get with this. So this is the part that you would order as a replacement if you had this one. If you had an FW number, you would have to convert it to an XA number. There's also the QR code, as we mentioned before, that takes you to parts on demand. There is a website in our resources page right at the end of this presentation, which will take you to parts on demand homepage. These QR codes do not take you to the homepage. It will take you to the parts page for this exact fifth wheel. So you'll be able to scan that with your cell phone, iPad, whatever you've got, and it will suddenly give you a part breakdown of this fifth wheel, parts, manuals, everything that you need. Some other things we'll try and work our way through here. So I mentioned the retention block for the yoke spring. The yoke spring comes down here. The yoke shaft is right at the back here, and then the yoke comes over, and that's what, as the drawers close, yokes jam down there and hold the yoke. Yoke holds the drawer shut, so that way, when it's driving down the yard, or if you do happen to use these over the road, it physically can't come undone. You could even if some parts manage to fall off, these bolts weren't done up properly, the secondary lock will still hold everything in place. So this is the cam plate that we mentioned before. We've changed the cam plate. This is the crescent shape that we've got here, slightly different to the old one. Dan mentioned about the changes. You see that's pretty tight in there, but if they do come loose, it does go over the end of the secondary lock roll pin. So we've actually elongated that in the newer versions, just going into production about now. Air cylinder. So we have an air cylinder. I've got another one here that's not connected, but there's two air lines. There's one under here, one over here. And all you need to do is just pop these air lines out and put some tool oil in that. If you've got disconnected, you can pull out, just clean this shaft here. Make sure some light penetrating oil, just clean that off. Make sure that this is not no abrasives or anything like that. If you do have an issue, there is a date code. We can trace these. So if ever you do need to send these back for any reason, or there's a query on it, you make sure you've got that date code on the air cylinder as well. As Dan mentioned before, with the air cylinder, one end is to activate it, the other end is just a secondary lock based on the air going to the regular end for the trailers. So air in that locks this, means that you can't physically unlock it by accident by hitting the palm valve. So it's a good, nice to have. We thoroughly recommend it, and it doesn't take a lot of infrastructure to do it, because this is already here. You're going to have a length of nylon tube to atmosphere. All you need to do is connect that nylon tube to a T-piece for the red airline, and that's it. So it's going to cost you a T-piece and the length of tubing. So very nice to have. Lubrication points. This is the one here, this cam plate pivot point. This is the one that just gets some light oil on it. Everything else has lithium-based water-resistant grease. Okay, so all the other cam points, lubrication points, including the rest of the cam, have grease on it. This one point here is just a light oil. Some other stuff to run through. Notice it's very dark over here. So Dan also mentioned the pins, the jaw pins here. So they're not a snap ring, and they're not a press fit anymore. These are a slip fit. Now there's just a nut mechanism on it. These hold these in place, much easier for technicians to work on. So yeah, good idea to run on these. These, I will say that if you do happen to have a FW35 standard over the road version, it's the same basic mechanism, same principle, essentially the same sort of casting. But this is the big brother. So the kits, you need to make sure you get the right kit for the right part. Don't use a standard 35 kit in this, because they certainly won't last as long. All right, anything else I missed, Dan?
Not right now. Once we get it locked up though, I'd like to come back to this. Let's,
Okay. No problems, I can do that. So we did before, we mentioned the lock tester. Here's one we have here. This is what it looks like. We know that that's a 2-inch kingpin. It's not like most in the shops where they just get an old kingpin that's undersized, and then you've got an over-adjusted fifth wheel. It has the lever handle here and the J hook, which sits on the front skirt. So normally you would do this horizontal.
okay.
Sorry. You want to flip it over?
Yep.
Okay. So I mentioned before, lock tester, it has 3 points of contact, so you know it's always square. Unlike the older versions that I mentioned before that some people have in their shops, the kingpin welded to a rod. You don't know if it's going to sit at a weird angle. This one is very simplistic. You can use it. It's left or right-handed. Bang. Okay. It's that simple. Works smarter, not harder. You'll notice that that's pretty good. It's not over tightened. It's not really tight. You'll notice if anyone uses it over the road, 351, FW35 fifth wheel, if it's over adjusted, that's really tight to spin. So we mentioned about checking the play on this. So literally you just pull the lock tester back, scribe a line, push it forward, scribe another line. Now, if I was to move this, you'll see, and zoom in close then, you'll see how much that moves. Okay. That's nowhere near 3/8 of an inch. This is perfect. This is ready to be reused. Okay.
So locks are bored, oversized on the yard spotter wheel to accommodate for bent kingpins. So there will be a little bit of play there, but once you get to 3/8 of an inch, then it's time to put a jaw kit in it at a minimum.
Correct. Okay. This lock tester is also multi-purpose. It does also get used for some of our other fifth wheels as well. So that's why there's cutouts and so forth in it. That's for our other fifth wheels. But for the 35TT, this fifth wheel, it's essentially, this is what you need. You don't need all the cutouts for it. But I thoroughly recommend this because you'll be able to use this across our whole fifth wheel range.
Okay. Flip her back over.
Now, yeah, let's see what the mechanism looks like locked. Okay, so now that we're locked, obviously you can see, get the flashlight. So now we can see the kingpin in here. Okay, the locks have come together around the kingpin. You see there's a slight gap in here. Obviously the jaws won't hit each other because that would be the bump stop. There's got to be a slight gap in between there. And then the yoke itself comes down on either side and wedges between the casting and the jaws. And that stops the kingpin being able to come out because the jaws won't. Okay. So the yoke comes here and wedges, jaws can't open, kingpin can't come out. Okay. The secondary lock here, as I mentioned before, this is the secondary lock. Even if the yoke was to try and come open, this will hold the yoke from coming up, and you won't be able to actually, it won't be able to release the kingpin because that won't come up far enough to open the jaws enough to let the kingpin out. So this is the safety mechanism that we have.
So one thing to keep an eye on the secondary is if you get a fifth wheel that will not unlock, this is the first place that I would check. Make sure that this pin is still intact. If it's not intact, this finger, that automatic secondary, will not be able to move out to the side to allow the yoke to come up. Okay. In that instance, you're going to have to get a J hook or something to hold this open, activate it. That'll let the fifth wheel release. We say that fifth wheels don't drop trailers, people drop trailers. And this is the reason why. This automatic secondary, when this thing is locked, those jaws are not coming undone. So if the driver did his job to make sure that the kingpin is around, the jaws are around the kingpin, the upper coupler's flat to the fifth wheel, handles in on and over the road, then he's done his job. That thing will not come undone. Another area that I want to talk about is this bolt right here. Okay, your yoke shaft bolt. This cam plate, you can move it, and the adjustment here, or the specification here, is 60 to 120 thousandths. That's how much movement is in here. Question we give is, what's the torque on this bolt? The answer is there is none. There is no torque specification. This bolt cuts its own threads into the yoke shaft, okay? So if you replace this bolt, you are going to be replacing the yoke shaft. Do not cannibalize your parts kit. Just pull another bolt out and stick it in there. It will not work. If it does, it's not going to work for very long. So replacing this bolt, replacing the shaft because it cuts its own threads in there.
All right. One other thing to mention is we also mentioned about the pocket liners. They sit in there like so. Okay, this is a perfect example because there's only one head. There's a fifth wheel in my display here. There's no grease zerks or anything on these. You don't have to weld these or anything like the old 03505s. They just sit in there. So you can see here, little dot of grease or something just to hold that in place until you get the fifth wheel on, and then it just sits there for the rest of its life. So no need to weld, makes it a lot easier for technicians going forward. So yeah, there's no pocket liner on this side, and there is on the other side.
Okay.
All right, I think that just about wraps us up for this.
I think so.
All right, let's go back to the last few slides in the presentation. I'll let Dan go the camera back. I'll get the presentation ready. All right, there we go. So we mentioned before about available resources. So the very first line there is our website, SAF-HOLLAND.US. If you do accidentally type SAF-HOLLAND.com, don't panic, it will take you to our global website. It just means that you've got to hit the USA and English, and then it will put you straight in the same place you would have been if you had have hit .US. We do understand we have a really broad product range. It's not just fifth wheels that we have, it's couplings, landing gear, axles, suspensions. We've now Haldex as part of the family. So we have braking systems, calipers, all sorts of things. So to get around that, to make life easier for the technicians, we have what we call microsites. Finding stuff on our standard website, there's a whole bunch of stuff on there, but it's not, there's a lot to wade through. So we've actually got a microsite for just fifth wheels. So it's hollandfifthwheels.com, and I'll go a little bit more in depth in that shortly. The FW35TT manuals, we have the owner's manual there listed. You can look up the document number, and the rebuild manual is also there. We do also have the videos. Those are available on our YouTube site. They are also available on our microsite as well. So there's the rebuild and adjustment and the promo videos for this fifth wheel. And last but not least, we do have a YouTube channel, obviously, because I've already referred to it, but you can just search for SAF Holland. It's the page is actually called the SAF Holland. It's the official channel that we have, but a lot of our videos are also cross from the YouTube channel also onto our microsite, which is what we'll dig into. So if you were to go to the microsite, hollandfifthwheels.com, this is what you would look at. So the header there, you'll see there's obviously the splash image that we have across the top. And then underneath that, you have a list of our fifth wheel range. So we have the 35 and the 33, which is the low lube version. And then you get to the 35TT, which is what we've got. And then we have all the rest and the mounting options as well. So if you were to click on the 35TT, it will put you a little further down the page. And here you have a parts guide and the link to the owner's manual, and the rebuild video that we mentioned earlier is also there. Like I said, it's also available on YouTube, as you can see in the bottom left of the video there. But if you're in the microsite, you can just play it straight from there as well. So, should you have any problems, so there's a bunch of helpful names, email addresses and phone numbers here on this page. Obviously, we've already introduced Dan Cohn. He's one of our national accounts managers. I'm Tony Ryan. I'm the person who runs the field service group. And then we have the four field guys. We have Ben D'Artes on the West Coast, Kenny Shepard on the East Coast, and Kyle Hinton and Ronnie Hines run down the middle of the country. You'll see by the emails, they haven't quite updated the emails with the Haldex integration. That will be coming in the next few months. But for now, you can use those emails. They will certainly come across. The guys will get them, or just call their cell numbers, and they'll be able to help you as needed. All right. Anything I missed, Dan?
No, I think we got it all covered.
Awesome. All right. Well, we'll let you go. Thank you for watching the presentation today. Like we said, there's plenty of contact numbers there. If you need help, we will certainly be of help where we can. And we'll get this video wrapped up. We will put this up on the YouTube channel and on our microsites. So thank you for anyone who's watching this, and we'll let you go. Thank you.